Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Serena. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Richard Harrington looked up. His eyes swept over her. Black woman, apron, notepad, and he smirked. A black waitress at the Capitol Room? He turned to his partners, voice booming. What's next? Food stamps for appetizers? Laughter exploded. 3 men howling. Hey, sweetheart, since you're serving the real money. He made air quotes. Got any stock tips for us? The table roared. Someone at the bar pulled out a phone. Recording. A woman nearby whispered, half smiling. Nobody said a word. Nobody stopped him. The black waitress stood perfectly still, face calm, spine straight. Would you like to hear one, sir? The laughter died. What nobody knew, not the billionaire, not his laughing partners, not the people filming, was that in 10 minutes, this man would be begging her to save him from losing $200 million. They wouldn't be laughing for long. The Capitol Room sat on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Lower Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a living painting. The Brooklyn Bridge in the distance, the lights of Jersey City flickering across the Hudson, the endless grid of streets pulsing with Friday night energy. White tablecloths, crystal glassware that caught the light just so. The kind of steakhouse where a bottle of wine cost more than most people's car payments, and nobody blinked at a $400 check for 2. Friday night, 8 o'clock. The dining room hummed with the particular energy of money celebrating itself. Hedge fund managers loosened their ties after closing deals. Investment bankers clinked glasses over bonuses they hadn't earned yet. Corporate lawyers laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. The air smelled like aged beef, expensive cologne, and the particular confidence that comes from never having to check a price tag. Serena Anderson moved through it all like water. 34 years old, black woman, crisp white shirt tucked into black pants, apron tied neat around her waist, hair pulled back in a low bun that kept it out of her face during the long shifts. She carried 3 plates on one arm with the kind of ease that only comes from years of practice. Muscle memory so deep she didn't have to think about it anymore. Her steps were precise. Her smile was warm but measured. Her eyes missed nothing. In rooms like this, Serena had learned which version of herself made people comfortable. The one who smiled but didn't linger. Who anticipated needs but never offered opinions. Who was helpful but never threatening. Who existed in the background, efficient and invisible, part of the scenery rather than the story. It wasn't bitterness that taught her this. It was observation, strategy, survival even. You learned quickly in service work, especially in high-end service work, what people expected and what happened when you didn't deliver it. She set down a porterhouse at table 12. The man didn't look up from his phone, typing something urgent probably, or pretending to. She refilled water at table 8. The woman kept talking to her companion as if Serena were furniture, a pleasant, functional piece of the room's decor that happened to pour liquids, invisible. That was the job. Be excellent, be efficient, be invisible. Near the bar, a television played CNBC on mute. Stock tickers scrolled across the bottom of the screen in an endless green and red parade. The market's daily heartbeat translated into numbers. Serena's eyes caught them for just a moment as she passed, a flicker of recognition, a sharpening of focus, a muscle memory she couldn't quite suppress, even after 3 years away from that world. Meridian Tech, down 2% on the day, trading at $138 and change. She filed the information away automatically and continued toward the service station. Old habits, hard to kill. Yo, Serena. Derek appeared beside her, balancing a tray of empty glasses. Fellow server, black man, early 40s, salt and pepper beard that he kept meticulously trimmed. He'd been at the Capitol Room for 6 years. Knew every regular's name, every preference, Every unspoken rule about how things worked in places like this. He knew which customers tipped well and which ones didn't, which ones wanted conversation and which ones wanted to be left alone, which ones looked at you like a person and which ones looked through you like glass. He was also the closest thing she had to a friend in this place. "Table 8, he said, voice low so nobody else would hear. Asked if I actually work here. Again. Serena sighed, the familiar weight of it settling on her shoulders. "Third time this week?" "Fourth, but who's counting?" He shook his head, letting out a laugh that was also a release valve. The kind of laugh that said, "We both know. We both carry it. We keep moving anyway." You'd think the uniform would be a hint. The apron, the notepad, the fact that I just took their drink order. You'd think. They shared a look, the kind that didn't need words, the kind built over months of similar moments, similar questions, similar assumptions from people who couldn't imagine that someone who looked like them could possibly belong in a place like this, even as staff. Derek grabbed a fresh tray of waters. "Your section's about to get interesting, by the way. Four Top just got seated at table 9, loud guy in the blue suit. His voice carries like he wants the whole room to know he's here." Serena glanced toward the front of the restaurant. 4 men were settling into the corner booth, the best table in the house, with views of both the kitchen and the skyline. Expensive suits. Confident postures. The kind of men who took up more space than they needed because they'd never been asked to take less. The one in the center, blue suit, silver watch catching the light, gray hair swept back from a tanned forehead, was already talking, gesturing broadly, commanding the attention of everyone at his table and several tables nearby. She recognized him before he even finished sitting down. Richard Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Capital. Net worth somewhere north of $4 billion, according to the last Forbes estimate. Known for aggressive short positions and even more aggressive opinions. He'd been on CNBC just last week, dismissing a younger analyst's investment thesis with the kind of casual cruelty that passed for entertainment in financial media. "That's not analysis," he'd said, smirking at the camera. "That's wishful thinking with a spreadsheet." The clip had gone viral. The younger analyst had responded on Twitter. The financial world had picked sides, and Richard Harrington had loved every minute of it, because controversy was currency in his world. 3 years ago, Serena would have been in rooms with men like him. Different chair, different clothes, different life. She would have held her own, more than held her own. She grabbed her notepad. "I've got them." Derek raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I can swap if you want. Patterson won't notice." "I'm sure." She walked toward table 9, spine straight, face neutral, mind already calculating. Richard Harrington. She knew his fund. She knew his investment style, the aggressive shorts, the public pronouncements, the theatrical confidence. She knew the position he'd been building for the last 2 months, the one financial Twitter was buzzing about, the one he probably thought was clever. She also knew it was a mistake, but he wasn't paying her for that. He was paying her to bring him a steak and keep his water glass full and disappear when she wasn't needed. So that's what she would do. Unless he asked. 3 years ago, Serena Anderson was a quantitative analyst at Steinberg Quantitative, one of the most respected boutique hedge funds in the city. She built predictive models. She wrote algorithms that processed thousands of data points and identified patterns invisible to the human eye. She sat in conference rooms full of men who looked like Richard Harrington and held her own. More than held her own. She was one of the best. The models she built had generated returns that made partners rich. Then her mother had a stroke. Massive. Unexpected. The kind that rewrites everything in a single moment. No siblings to share the load. No father in the picture. Hadn't been since Serena was 12. Someone had to be there. Someone had to coordinate the doctors and the rehabilitation and the endless insurance fights. Someone had to hold her mother's hand during the scary nights and advocate for better care during the frustrating days. Someone had to pay the bills while doing all of it. Wall Street doesn't accommodate caregivers. The hours are brutal. The expectations are absolute. You're either all in, available at any moment, willing to sacrifice everything else, or you're out. Serena chose her mother. She chose night classes for an MBA she could finish slowly, on her own schedule. She chose double shifts at a restaurant where the tips were good, and the flexibility was real. She chose patience over pride, presence over prestige. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She'd made a choice. A hard one, but hers. Still, sometimes, late at night, when her feet ached and her mind wandered back to the life she'd left, she missed being seen for what she knew instead of what she carried. A regular customer stopped her near the bar. Eleanor, 70s, white hair styled in elegant waves, kind eyes behind designer glasses. She came in every Thursday for the salmon and a glass of Sancerre, and she always asked for Serena's section. "Serena, you're wasted here," Eleanor said. "Not for the first time. The way you talk about the market, you've lived it, haven't you?" Serena smiled, deflected. "I read a lot." Eleanor's eyes were sharp despite her age. "Readers don't have that look, that reflex, the way your eyes go to the ticker like it's a language you speak fluently." She patted Serena's hand with papery fingers. "Whoever you were before, dear, she's still in there, waiting." Serena nodded politely and moved on. She had a table to serve, a billionaire who'd never think to ask what she knew, unless he did. Table 9 had a particular energy, the kind that radiated outward and made nearby diners unconsciously lower their voices, as if proximity to that much money required a certain deference. Richard Harrington sat at the center naturally. The three men around him, younger, eager, leaning in to catch every word, were junior partners at his fund. Serena had seen the type 1,000 times in 1,000 different rooms. Men who laughed before the punchline landed, who nodded before the sentence finished, who agreed before they even knew what they were agreeing to. Satellites orbiting a sun that burned everyone who got too close. She approached with her notepad, professional smile in place. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Serena. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Richard didn't look up from his menu, his eyes scanning the wine list with the practiced disinterest of someone who already knew what he wanted but enjoyed making others wait. "Macallan 18. Neat. Make sure it's actually 18. The assumption hung in the air like cigarette smoke. "Make sure you don't try to cheat me. Make sure you actually know what you're doing. Make sure you understand who you're dealing with." "Of course, sir." She took the other drink orders. One of the junior partners, younger than the rest, sandy hair, nervous energy that vibrated just below the surface, made eye contact and said, "Please," when he ordered his bourbon. The others followed Richard's lead. Minimal words, minimal acknowledgement, minimal recognition that she was a person rather than a service mechanism. She was furniture, functional, invisible. She wrote down the orders and turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped her. "Hold on." He was looking at her now. Actually looking. His eyes did that sweep, the one she'd experienced countless times in countless rooms, from countless men who thought they could measure a person's worth in 3 seconds flat, taking in her uniform, her skin, her position in the room's hierarchy, drawing a conclusion before she'd spoken more than 20 words. She knew exactly what he saw. A black woman in an apron, a server in a steakhouse, someone who existed to bring him things and fade into the background until needed again. He had no idea who she was. And why would he? People like Richard Harrington didn't wonder about the inner lives of people who served them dinner. Didn't imagine that the woman pouring their water might have once sat in rooms just like this one on the other side of the table. "We're celebrating tonight," Richard announced, voice pitched loud enough for adjacent tables to hear. He wanted an audience. He always wanted an audience. "Just closed a major position, Meridian Tech." He leaned back, satisfaction radiating from every pore. "Biggest short of the quarter, maybe the year." The junior partners made appreciative noises. One said, "Brilliant call, sir." Another raised his water glass in premature toast. The third, the nervous one, just nodded rapidly, eager to be seen agreeing. Serena's pen paused on her notepad. Just for a moment. Just long enough to be almost imperceptible. Meridian Tech. She knew that company. She knew that trade. She'd been watching it for weeks, out of habit, out of interest, out of the part of her brain that never really left the game. She'd tracked the filings, analyzed the patterns, seen things that most analysts would miss because they weren't looking in the right places. Richard Harrington was wrong. His short position was a mistake, and in about 10 days, when certain information became public, he was going to find out exactly how wrong. But he didn't notice her pause, or rather, he noticed and misread it entirely. Saw hesitation where there was recognition, saw confusion where there was calculation, saw exactly what he expected to see, because that's how assumptions work. A small smile crossed his face, the kind that preceded cruelty dressed up as humor. He glanced at his partners, making sure they were watching, making sure they'd laugh. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. "You're serving the money here. Got any stock tips for us?" The table erupted. Laughter, synchronized and performative. One of them slapped the table. Another shook his head like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. The nervous one laughed too, but his eyes flickered with something that might have been discomfort. A crack in the performance that nobody else seemed to notice. It wasn't really a question. It was a performance. A power move dressed up as humor. A way of saying, "I know what you are. You know what you are. Let's all enjoy the obvious gap between us." The laughter carried across the dining room. Heads turned at nearby tables. A woman at the adjacent booth, 50s, elegant suit, silver-streaked hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, glanced over with an expression that was hard to read. Interest, maybe. Or recognition of something familiar. Serena stood perfectly still. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't perform the embarrassment he was clearly waiting for, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing his words land the way he intended. Instead, she met his eyes. Calm, level. Something shifted in her posture. Subtle, but present. A straightening of the spine, a settling into herself. A door opening that had been closed for 3 years. "Would you like to hear one, sir?" The laughter stuttered, then stopped. Richard's smile flickered. That wasn't the response he expected. Servers didn't push back. They laughed nervously and scurried away and complained to each other in the kitchen. That was the script. The comfortable, predictable script that kept everyone in their proper place. She wasn't following the script. He recovered quickly, leaned back, waved a magnanimous hand, playing to his audience. "Sure, sweetheart. Enlighten us." He glanced at his partners, inviting them back into the joke. "I could use the entertainment." More laughter, but quieter now, uncertain. Something in her voice had created a crack in the performance. Serena didn't smile, didn't drop her gaze. "Which position did you want advice on? The Meridian Tech short?" The laughter died completely. Richard's face changed. It was subtle at first, a tightening around the jaw, a flicker of something in his eyes that looked almost like surprise. He hadn't mentioned Meridian Tech by name, not directly, not in a way she should have heard or understood, or so he thought. The truth was simpler. She'd been listening from the moment she approached the table. processing, analyzing, cross-referencing what he said with what she already knew. The same way she used to listen in conference rooms, picking up patterns in what people said and didn't say, building models in her head while everyone else was still catching up. But Richard's mind went somewhere else entirely, a more comfortable explanation. Lucky guess. She overheard something. She's parroting words she doesn't understand, trying to seem sophisticated. "Everyone in finance knows Meridian," he said dismissively, waving a hand like he was shooing away a fly. "It's been all over the news." "It has," Serena agreed. Her voice was steady, calm, not challenging, just certain. The voice of someone stating facts, not opinions. "Your entry point was around $142, yes? Standard position sizing for a fund your size would put you at roughly 400,000 shares. Maybe 450 if you were feeling aggressive." Silence crashed over the table like a wave. That wasn't public information. That was analysis. Specific, detailed analysis that required access to filings, an understanding of fund mechanics, and the ability to reverse engineer a position from scattered data points. Analysis that most professional analysts couldn't do without a team and a Bloomberg terminal. Richard's smile was gone now. His partners had frozen. Forks suspended halfway to mouths, glasses hovering in midair, faces caught between confusion and something that looked almost like alarm. The nervous one's eyes had gone wide. "How would you—" Richard started. "Your 13F filing from last quarter," Serena said evenly, not letting him finish. "Cross-referenced with the options flow that hit the tape 3 weeks ago. The unusual put activity on Meridian with strike prices below current trading levels. It's public record, Mr. Harrington. All of it. You just have to know where to look." She let that land. And how to read what you're looking at. One of the junior partners, the nervous one with sandy hair, leaned forward slightly. His brow was furrowed. She could almost see him running the numbers in his head, checking her math against what he knew about the fund's positions. Richard shifted in his seat. The casual confidence was cracking, but his ego was still in the driver's seat, still trying to regain control of a conversation that had slipped sideways without warning. "So, you read filings," he said. The dismissiveness was back, but there was an edge underneath it now. A sharpness that hadn't been there before. The voice of a man who wasn't used to being challenged and didn't like the feeling. "Good for you. Pick that up while you were clearing plates? Learn some fancy words between refilling water glasses?" The insult was deliberate, pointed. A reminder of the hierarchy. I'm the billionaire. You're the waitress. Know your place. Serena didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing the words land. "You're overexposed on Meridian," she said, as if he hadn't spoken at all. "But that's not actually your biggest problem." Something in the room shifted. The ambient noise had dropped. Conversations at nearby tables had gone quiet. People pretending to focus on their food while their ears strained toward table 9. The hostess near the front had paused mid-sentence, menus clutched forgotten in her hands. Even the background clatter from the kitchen seemed to have dimmed. The woman at the adjacent table, the one in the elegant suit, set down her wine glass. Her eyes were fixed on Serena now, watching with an intensity that suggested more than idle curiosity. The intensity of someone who recognized something. Richard's jaw tightened. Every instinct was telling him to shut this down, to dismiss her with a wave and a cutting remark and return to the comfortable reality where he was the smartest person in the room, where waitresses didn't know things, where the hierarchy held. But another instinct was louder, the one that had made him $4 billion, the one that recognized information when he heard it, regardless of the source. The one that knew the difference between noise and signal. How does she know this? "Your biggest problem," Serena continued, her voice still calm, still measured, "is that your research team missed something. Something important. Something that's going to cost you more than you're prepared to lose." "And what would that be?" His voice was harder now. The performance was over. The mask was off. This was the real Richard Harrington, the one who'd clawed his way to the top of a brutal industry, the one who didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone he'd already categorized and dismissed, someone he'd already decided didn't matter. "I'd rather not say in a public setting," Serena said. "Professional courtesy." Richard laughed, but it was a different laugh now. Sharp, defensive, carrying an edge that cut. "Professional courtesy? You're a waitress." "I'm a lot of things." The words hung in the air, simple, undefended, true. One of the junior partners exchanged a glance with another, a silent conversation happening in that look. Who is she? What's happening? Should we be worried? The nervous one had his phone out under the table now, typing something, probably checking her claims, probably starting to realize she might not be wrong. Richard studied her for a long moment. Really studied her. Not the dismissive sweep from before, but an actual assessment. Trying to figure out who he was dealing with. Trying to find the angle, the trick, the explanation that would make this make sense. "All right," he said finally. His voice was different now, quieter. The bravado stripped away, leaving something raw underneath. Tell me what my biggest problem is." Serena glanced around the restaurant, at the nearby tables full of curious faces pretending not to watch, at the partners hanging on every word, at the woman at the adjacent table who hadn't looked away once. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Because once I say it, I can't unsay it. And your partners are going to have questions. Questions you might not want to answer in public." Richard's eyes narrowed. For a moment, she thought he might back down, might wave her off and pretend this whole conversation never happened, might retreat to the safety of the hierarchy and the script. But his ego wouldn't let him. Couldn't let him. Not in front of his partners, not in front of the room, not in front of himself. "I'm sure." Serena set down her notepad on the edge of the table. The gesture was small, but everyone noticed it. A physical marker of a shift. She wasn't taking his order anymore. The dynamic had changed. "Your fund took a major short position on Meridian Tech 8 weeks ago," she said. "You've been adding to it since then, building it up carefully. You're betting the stock drops significantly, probably expecting some bad news in their next earnings report. Slowing growth, supply chain issues, market headwinds, something like that." Richard said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. "The problem is you're wrong. Meridian isn't going down, it's going up. Significantly. And soon." "Based on what?" He asked the question expecting nothing. Now he was afraid of the answer. Serena took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was the same volume it had always been. But somehow, it filled more space, carried more weight, commanded more attention. "Based on 3 things you missed. 3 things your research team missed. 3 things that are going to turn your biggest short of the quarter into one of the most expensive mistakes of your career." She paused. Let the words settle. Let the weight of them press down on the table. "Do you want me to continue, Mr. Harrington? Or would you like to enjoy your steaks in peace and find out the hard way in about 10 days? The restaurant had gone almost silent. Everyone was watching now. The pretense of not listening had evaporated completely. Richard Harrington looked at the woman standing in front of him, the waitress with the notepad, the nobody he'd asked for stock tips as a joke. He should walk away. He should end this conversation and pretend it never happened and go back to his comfortable certainty. Back to the world where he was always right and people like her didn't know things. But he couldn't. Because she might be right. And if she was right, he needed to know. The stakes were too high. The money was too real. "Continue," he said quietly, almost a whisper. Serena nodded, and she began. "Exposure point 1, Serena said. Supply chain." She spoke the way she used to speak in conference rooms. Precise, methodical, each word chosen for maximum clarity and impact. The voice of someone who had done this 1,000 times, who had stood in front of skeptical audiences and won them over with data and logic and sheer undeniable competence. Meridian's primary chip manufacturing is outsourced to a Taiwanese supplier called Linden Semiconductor. You know Linden. Your fund has had positions in them before, long in 2019, short in 2021. She paused. 3 weeks ago, Linden filed a restructuring notice with the Taiwan Stock Exchange, buried in a subsidiary filing. The kind of document that gets uploaded to a regulatory database and forgotten about because it's not in English and it's not flagged by the major news services. Richard's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed him. He was listening, really listening, the kind of listening that happened when someone realized they might have missed something important. The restructuring consolidates Linden's production capacity and eliminates a bottleneck in their fabrication process, which means Meridian's chip orders, which have been delayed for the past 2 quarters, move to the front of the queue. Their production timeline accelerates by 4 to 6 months. She let that sink in. That's not priced into Meridian's current valuation. The market thinks they're behind schedule. The market thinks the delays are going to hurt their Q4 numbers. But when the accelerated timeline becomes public, and it will, probably in their next earnings call, the stock moves up. Significantly. Silence from the table. The nervous junior partner was typing furiously on his phone under the table, no longer trying to hide it. Verifying, checking, probably pulling up the Linden filings right now. Exposure point 2, Serena continued. Insider activity. She had their complete attention now. Not just the table. Half the restaurant was watching. The bartender had stopped polishing glasses. 2 servers stood frozen near the kitchen door, trays balanced forgotten on their palms. Even the busboy had paused mid-reach, a dirty plate suspended in his hand. Over the past 8 weeks, Meridian's CEO has been accumulating shares, quietly, carefully. Small purchases spread across multiple accounts, personal holdings, family trusts, his wife's retirement account, his brother-in-law's brokerage account, a Delaware holding company that most people wouldn't connect to him without digging. Nothing that triggers major disclosure requirements. He's staying just under the thresholds that would force public announcement. She ticked off the details like she was reading from a spreadsheet she'd memorized. October 3rd, 12,000 shares through a family trust. October 11th, 8,000 through his personal account. October 19th, 15,000 through the Delaware holding company. October 28th, another 10,000 split across 3 accounts. She paused. You see the pattern? Richard's hand was flat on the table now, steadying himself. When a CEO is accumulating quietly, Serena said, it means one thing. He knows something about the next quarter that hasn't hit the street yet. He's buying because he's confident, because he knows something good is coming. And confident CEOs who are quietly loading up on their own stock don't usually see their prices drop. One of the junior partners muttered something under his breath. It sounded like, Jesus Christ. Exposure point 3. Serena's voice softened slightly, almost sympathetic. The voice of a doctor delivering a difficult diagnosis. And this is the one that's going to cost you the most. The restaurant was silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind that presses down on everyone in the room. Even the ambient noise from the kitchen had faded to nothing. 2 weeks ago, Meridian filed a regulatory document with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. 134 pages, mostly technical specifications for semiconductor architecture. Legal boilerplate. Dense jargon that would put most people to sleep. The kind of document that gets filed and ignored because nobody wants to read 134 pages of engineering details and patent claims. She paused. Let the anticipation build. Let them lean in. But on page 84, buried between a technical schematic and a prior art analysis, there's an approval notification. Their new chip architecture. The one they've been developing for 3 years. The one they've been hemorrhaging R&D money into. The one the market has basically written off as vaporware. Past final regulatory review. Full approval. Green light for commercial production. Richard's face had gone pale. The tan couldn't hide it anymore. When that news hits mainstream coverage, and it will, probably within the next 10 days, maybe sooner if someone leaks it, or if an analyst actually reads the filing, Meridian stock jumps 15 to 20%, maybe more, depending on how the market reacts to the technical specifications. If the architecture is as good as the filing suggests, and I believe it is, you could be looking at 25%. She did the math for him, out loud, so everyone could hear. Your short position, at current exposure, loses you somewhere between $180 and $220 million. Maybe more if the spike is sharp and you can't exit fast enough. That's not a bad quarter. That's a catastrophe. The number hung in the air like a physical object. $220 million. One of the junior partners had stopped pretending to check his phone. He was staring at Serena with an expression that mixed horror with something that looked almost like awe. The kind of expression you make when you realize you're watching something historic happen in real time. But you don't have to take my word for it, Serena said. The filing is public. Edgar database. Anyone with an internet connection can access it. I'm guessing your research team skimmed it. Saw the page count, saw the technical language, maybe ran a keyword search that didn't flag anything important and moved on. A slight pause. Page 84 is easy to miss when you're looking for reasons to confirm what you already believe. Richard still hadn't spoken. His jaw was tight. His breathing was shallow. I've seen this pattern before, Serena said. Same dynamics. Same kind of mistake. Same kind of confidence that blinds you to what's right in front of you. Axiom Technologies, 2019. Something flickered across Richard's face. Recognition. And something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Axiom Technologies. Every fund manager in the industry remembered Axiom. It was a cautionary tale they told at conferences. Richard's fund had taken a massive short position, publicly, confidently. He'd gone on CNBC and explained in detail why Axiom was overvalued, why their technology was obsolete, why the stock was going to crash. He'd been charming and certain and utterly convincing. Then a regulatory approval had come through that no one expected. The stock soared 40% in 2 weeks. Harrington Capital lost $40 million. Richard had spent months rebuilding his reputation, his investor relationships, his confidence. You remember Axiom, don't you, Mr. Harrington? He didn't answer. Couldn't. I remember it too, Serena said quietly. I was on the other side of that trade. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Ripples spreading outward, reaching everyone in the room, on the other side. She hadn't just read about Axiom in the financial press. She hadn't just watched it happen from the sidelines. She had been in the arena. She had analyzed the same data Richard had analyzed, drawn the opposite conclusion, and bet accordingly. She had won. He had lost. The junior partner with the phone looked up. His face was ashen. The Steinberg model, he said slowly, recognition dawning. The one that called Axiom before anyone else. That was my model, Serena said simply. I built it. I wrote the algorithm. I designed the pattern recognition that flagged the regulatory approval before anyone else saw it coming. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Richard Harrington stared at the woman standing in front of him. The waitress. The nobody. The black woman in an apron he'd asked for stock tips as a joke. Your fund licensed the Steinberg predictive model in 2020, Serena continued. Paid 7 figures for access. Used it to inform your position sizing on at least a dozen major trades. Made good money with it, too. Your 2021 returns were up 32% partly because of signals that model generated. She met his eyes, held them. I built that model. I wrote the algorithm. I designed the architecture that your quants rely on. The trades you made with it? Those were my patterns, my analysis, my work. She let that settle, let the weight of it press down. You've been making money off my work for 4 years, Mr. Harrington, and you asked me for stock tips like it was a joke. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. No one at the table spoke. No one at adjacent tables spoke. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then someone at a nearby table exhaled sharply. A whispered, "Holy shit," cut through the silence like a knife. The dam broke. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The energy in the room reorganized itself around a new reality. The waitress had just schooled a billionaire, with his own playbook, using his own money's tools. He wanted entertainment. She gave him education. Richard Harrington had not been publicly corrected in over a decade. He'd built his entire identity on certainty. On reading markets, reading people, reading situations faster and more accurately than anyone else in the room. His fund, his reputation, his public persona, his sense of self, all of it rested on being the smartest person at any table he sat at, on seeing things others missed, on being right when everyone else was wrong. He'd looked at Serena Anderson and drawn a conclusion in less than 5 seconds. He'd seen the apron, the notepad, the position she occupied in the room's hierarchy, and he'd decided what she was worth, what she could possibly know, what she was allowed to be. He'd been completely, catastrophically, publicly wrong. The silence stretched. His partners wouldn't meet his eyes. The nervous one was still staring at his phone, scrolling through data that confirmed everything she'd said. Another was looking at Serena with an expression that mixed respect with something like disbelief, the expression of a man whose world had just shifted beneath his feet. "Who?" Richard's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Who the hell are you?" "I told you," Serena said. Her voice was calm, even. No triumph in it, no gloating, just facts. Serena Anderson, Steinberg Quantitative, 2016 to 2021, Senior Quantitative Analyst, Lead Developer on the predictive model your fund still uses. She paused. Before that, MIT, Mathematics and Economics, graduated with honors. Before that, public school in Bed-Stuy, and a lot of library books and teachers who told me I could be anything if I worked hard enough. She let the biography sink in. I left Steinberg 3 years ago. Family circumstances. My mother had a stroke, a bad one. Needed full-time care, and I was the only one who could provide it. She shrugged. Wall Street doesn't do part-time, doesn't do flexibility, doesn't do family emergencies that last longer than a week. So I made a choice. Richard was still processing. She could see him trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with his assumptions, trying to understand how he'd missed so badly, trying to find the flaw in his logic that had led him here. The MBA program at Columbia, she continued. Night classes. Another year until I finish. In the meantime, I work here. The tips are good. The hours are flexible. I can take care of my mother and still have a future. A slight smile. And occasionally, I get to keep my skills sharp. The junior partner with the phone spoke up. His voice was shaky. Richard, everything she said checks out. The Linden restructuring, the insider purchases, the patent filing. He swallowed hard. Page 84. It's all there. Exactly where she said it would be. Another partner. The pattern matches Axiom perfectly. If she's right about the timeline, she's right, the nervous one said. I'm looking at it right now. The approval notification, the technical specs, it's all there. Richard closed his eyes. Just for a moment. A long, heavy moment where you could see him accepting something he didn't want to accept. When he opened them, something had shifted. The arrogance was still there. It was too deeply embedded to disappear entirely, too much a part of who he was. But it had been joined by something else. Recognition. Humility, maybe. or at least the beginning of it. I should have... He stopped, started again. The way I asked, the joke, it was what it was, Serena said. You saw what you expected to see. Made the assumptions you've probably made 1,000 times before. It's human nature. She paused. The question is, what you do now. They looked at each other. For a long moment, neither spoke. Why? Richard asked finally. His voice was quieter now. Smaller. More human. Why tell me any of this? You could have let me walk into it. Let me lose everything. After the way I treated you, you could have just smiled and walked away and let me find out the hard way. Serena considered the question. It was a fair one. She'd asked it to herself when she felt the words rising in her throat, when she made the choice to answer instead of deflect. Because you asked, she said simply. And because despite everything, despite the way you asked, despite what you assumed about me, despite the joke and the laughter and the dismissal, you deserve accurate information. Everyone does. That's what I believe. That's why I built the models I built. Not to punish people for being wrong, to help them be right. She picked up her notepad from the edge of the table. The gesture was deliberate, a return to normalcy, a signal that the extraordinary moment was ending, that the world was rotating back to its normal axis. Your steaks will be out in about 10 minutes. The kitchen's running a little behind tonight. She paused. I'd recommend closing your meridian position first thing Monday morning, before the market opens. You'll still take a loss. You're too deep to exit cleanly, and the price will move against you as you unwind. But it'll be manageable. 30 million? Maybe 40. Better than 200. Richard nodded slowly. And if I wait? If I convince myself you're wrong? Then you'll learn the same lesson you learned with Axiom, and it'll cost you 5 times as much. She met his eyes. But I don't think you'll wait. I think you've learned something tonight. I think you'll remember this. She turned to leave, spine straight, steps measured. The same walk she used every night, every shift, every table. The walk of someone who knew exactly who she was, regardless of what anyone else thought. But the room saw it differently now. Every eye in the restaurant followed her. The woman who had just dismantled a billionaire's assumptions with nothing but her mind and her voice. He came to make her small. She left him with a lesson he'd never forget. Richard watched her go. His partners watched him. The silence at the table was profound, the kind of silence that follows something seismic. Finally, the nervous junior partner spoke. What do we do? Richard was quiet for a long moment, processing, recalibrating. When he answered, his voice was different, smaller, more honest. The voice of a man who'd just been reminded that he didn't know everything. We listen, he said. For once in our goddamn lives, we listen to someone who actually knows what she's talking about. He pulled out his phone, started typing. His CFO was about to get a very unexpected Friday night call. At the adjacent table, the woman in the elegant suit had been watching everything. She set down her napkin slowly, made a decision. The kind of decision that happens in a moment but changes the trajectory of lives, and stood up. Serena Anderson's night wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just about to change completely. Derek found her in the service station. Okay, what the hell just happened? He was grinning ear to ear, but his eyes were wide with disbelief. The whole restaurant is losing their minds. Someone at table 12 said you just told Richard Harrington, the Richard Harrington, that his trade was wrong? In front of everyone? Serena was organizing silverware. Her hands were steady, but there was something different in her posture. A release of tension she'd been carrying for longer than she realized. He asked for my opinion, she said. I gave it to him. All of it, apparently. Derek shook his head. I've been working in restaurants since I was 19. Never seen anything like that. Marcus from the bar said the man's face went white, like he'd seen a ghost. He saw his portfolio. Derek laughed. A real one this time. Full and warm. Serena Anderson, secret financial genius. Who knew? I wasn't secret, she said quietly. I just wasn't asked. Before Derek could respond, Mr. Patterson appeared, the restaurant manager. Mid-50s, perpetually stressed, already worried about damage control. Serena. His voice was tight. Table 9. Is there going to be a problem? They seemed agitated when I walked by. They paid in full, Serena said. Left a 40% tip. Mr. Patterson blinked. 40%? I provided excellent service. He stared at her for a long moment, clearly sensing there was more to the story but completely unsure how to ask about it. Finally, he just nodded. Good. That's good. Carry on. He retreated toward the host's stand, still confused. Derek snorted. 40%. The man tips 40% after you publicly humiliate him? I didn't humiliate him, Serena said. I informed him. There's a difference. Is there? He humiliated himself by making assumptions. I just provided data. Excuse me? The voice came from behind her. Serena turned. The woman from the adjacent table stood a few feet away. Up close, she was more striking than Serena had realized. Early 50s, silver-streaked hair cut sharp at her shoulders, elegant gray suit that probably cost more than Serena's monthly rent, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. I'm sorry to interrupt, the woman said, but I couldn't leave without introducing myself. She extended her hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. Victoria Collins. I run Collins Capital. Serena felt something shift in her chest. Collins Capital. $4 billion under management. One of the most successful mid-size funds in the city. And Victoria Collins was a legend. One of the few women who had built a fund from scratch and survived the industry's relentless pressure to fail. I know who you are, Serena said. I've followed your work. Then you know I don't waste time. Victoria's smile was small but genuine. That was the most impressive piece of real-time analysis I've witnessed in a public setting in years, maybe ever. I just told him what he should have already known. You synthesized 3 separate data streams, identified a pattern his entire research team missed, and delivered it under pressure in front of 50 witnesses. Victoria raised an eyebrow. That's not just anything. She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. Heavy stock, simple design. Her name, her title, a phone number. I understand you're finishing an MBA, Victoria said. Columbia, yes? Another year. When you're done, or before, if you decide you're ready, I want you to call me. She held out the card. I'm serious. What I saw tonight wasn't luck. It wasn't a party trick. It was pattern recognition at a level most analysts never develop. The kind that takes years to build. The kind you can't teach. Serena took the card. Her hand trembled slightly. The first visible emotion she'd shown all night. Why? She asked. You don't know me. I know what I saw. Victoria's voice was firm. And I know what it's like to be in a room where nobody thinks you belong. To have to be twice as good to get half the credit. She paused. I also know talent when I see it. Real talent. The kind that's being wasted clearing plates. Serena looked at the card in her hand. Collins Capital. Direct line. A door that hadn't existed 3 hours ago. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Victoria said. The work is hard. The hours are brutal. And you'll have to prove yourself all over again. She smiled. But you'll be doing it in a room where someone actually wants you to succeed. She turned to leave, then stopped. He's going to close that position Monday, you know. Harrington. Going to save himself a fortune because of what you told him. I know. Does that bother you? Helping someone who treated you like that? Serena considered the question. He asked for advice, she said finally. I gave it to him. What he does with it is his choice. What I do with my knowledge is mine. Victoria laughed, low, approving. Call me, Serena Anderson. Soon. And then she was gone. Serena stood in the service station, Victoria's card in her hand. Derek was watching her from across the room, a knowing smile on his face. Who was that? He asked. A door, Serena said quietly. One I didn't know was there. She didn't need everyone to see her. She needed one person who saw clearly. She slipped the card into her apron pocket, felt its edges press against her hip like a promise. 3 years of waiting tables, one night to be seen. 8 months later. Morning light poured through the windows of a corner office on the 34th floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The city stretched out below like a living map, steel and glass and endless possibility. Serena Anderson stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the East River. She still wasn't entirely used to the view. Her desk was neat, laptop open, 3 monitors showing market data and news feeds and SEC filings. A report she'd been working on, her analysis, her conclusions, her name at the top, waited for final review. 8 months since that night at the Capitol Room. 8 months since a billionaire had asked a waitress for stock tips and gotten more than he bargained for. Victoria Collins had been true to her word. The job offer came 2 weeks after that dinner. Senior strategist, not junior analyst, not associate, not any of the entry-level positions where she'd have to prove herself all over again from the bottom. You've already proven yourself, Victoria had said. To me, to Harrington, to everyone in that restaurant. I'm not interested in making you climb a ladder you've already climbed. I'm interested in what you can build. The hours were long. The pressure was constant. The work was demanding in ways that pushed her to her limits every single day, and she loved it. She was doing what she was built for, what she'd trained for, what she'd spent 3 years pretending she didn't miss. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Sunday dinner? I'm making your favorite. Serena smiled. Her mother had recovered. Not completely. There were still hard days, still limitations. But she was stable, living in her own apartment. A home health aide came 3 times a week. They had dinner together every Sunday. Serena could afford the aide now. Could afford a lot of things she couldn't before. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. The part that mattered was the look on her mother's face when Serena had told her about the job. The tears, the pride, the words she'd said, holding her daughter's hands. I always knew you'd find your way back, baby. I always knew. Richard Harrington closed his Meridian position that Monday just like Serena suggested. He lost $32 million. A significant amount, but manageable. Survivable. When the patent news broke 9 days later, Meridian's stock jumped 22% in a single session. If he'd held his position, the losses would have been catastrophic. Career-ending, potentially. He never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but his partners did, and the story spread through trading floors and hedge fund dinners and financial Twitter like wildfire. The billionaire who asked a waitress for stock tips and got schooled. Someone told Serena that Richard was different now, more careful, more willing to listen, less quick to dismiss people based on what they looked like or where they worked. She wasn't sure she believed it entirely. But maybe. Maybe he thought twice now before assuming he knew someone's worth at a glance. Maybe that was something. Serena turned from the window and sat down at her desk. In her closet at home, hanging in the back, was her waitress uniform, black apron, white shirt, the outfit she'd worn the night everything changed. She'd kept it, not as a reminder of hardship, not as a symbol of struggle, but as proof of what she'd carried through those 3 years, what she hadn't lost, even when no one was looking, even when no one thought to ask. The woman who wore that apron and the woman who sat in this office were the same person. Same mind, same spine, same quiet certainty. The only difference was that now the world could see it too. Excellence doesn't announce itself. It waits, and when asked, it answers. She straightened her blazer, the same motion she used to straighten her apron, and headed for the conference room. Same calm, same focus, same her, finally seen. He asked her worth as a joke. She answered with her life.